Chat GPT or not, I don't know, but the topic of our discussion is certainly, putting India on the path to a 10 trillion economy is probably fodder for 2 PhD theses. And as I was telling Mr. Jawa earlier, that we have to crunch it all into 25 or 30 odd minutes. So I may sound rude if I interject. It's probably my old television anchoring habits. Old habits die hard. Please don't take it too seriously. I'm just managing time. So before we take any longer, I'm going to start straight away with Mr. Jawa. You're an Unilever wanderlust. All over the world. Last pit stop, I think, was China. Unlike China, India historically has been a consumption-driven economy, right? Now, for the last 1 year, however, we've been hearing this narrative from several consumer companies, including HUL, that both value and volume growth, that's been on average or even declining in some categories, in rural markets or in the low or middle income India. So this year's recovery, are we expected to be on a lower base, or actual consumption demand is coming back and we are out of a funk, so to speak?
Yeah, since you started by asking me on my trajectory of travel of the last 2 decades, so I've been in almost all countries in Southeast Asia, also a significant time in China as well, and having been back for about a year, I am very, very optimistic and charged by what I've seen, because it's almost like a new chapter in my career. And I see coming back here, in the space of digital or soft infrastructure, absolutely path-breaking evolution. We often struggle with companies, to transform them digitally, and here's a whole country over the last 2 decades is absolutely transformed, and that India tech stack is massively changing the country. It's opening up aspirations. It's effectively creating a new factor of productivity, which is going to last a long time. I also see a massive transformation in infrastructure, hard infrastructure, whether it's ports, bridges, roads, airports. Yeah. And that means that the productive capacity of the economy is unleashing. So if you look back and see the trajectory of consumption, which is really what closer to my field of business, closer to my heart, and I've tracked across every segment that we are in, and we are every segment of ours is about 4 to 5 times lower than neighboring countries like China, Indonesia, and so on and so forth. So it is absolutely without doubt that you can see the inflection curves taking place, and all of the categories will go through an S-curve. It's unlikely it's going to be a smooth, straight path. If you look back 10 years, it's not been the same either. But if you do a time travel today and come back in 10 years, all our markets we are in are going to be much, much bigger. So we have to not get too focused on just the very short term. Just look at what companies like ours, we've been here 90 years. Yeah. We have, what's good for India is good for us, and we know that this is going to be a bright future.
So this is a structural shift?
I think this is just a wrinkle in the passage of time. Right. And we must not look at short-term volatility as a big deal. If you look back, we invest for the future. Segments across our markets are doing well. Some are slow, some are fast. So I feel very, very positive, and we are here and investing for the long term.
Right. Falguni, if I may come to you, Rohit talked about S-shaped recovery. People talk about K-shaped, U-shaped recovery. From your corner office, you get a ringside view of the premium segment of the market, which is, of course, growing, but is also interestingly getting younger. Just yesterday, one of my Gen Z colleagues taught me a new term. It's called Sephora Teens. Apparently, teenagers are visiting Sephora shops to buy beauty products. Now, this is happening in India when in America, Revlon, Body Shop, all these brands are shutting shop. So, what's happening?
So I think if you look at the consumption of beauty in the country, and Rohit mentioned the S-curve, we are on a per capita basis, our consumption is even below where we should be given our income levels. So there is a lot of categories, especially premium categories and lifestyle categories, where I think consumption in the country is way beyond where it should be. And I think there's a lot of good work that has happened in terms of uplifting the incomes of Indian households. And the numbers there are stunning when we look at that. I mean, just someone like me and all of us have seen economy for so many years, and the way the economic classes have been lifted to upper income levels, and that is surely to drive consumption. Yes, the consumption age is getting younger. Gen Z, I think even Nykaa stores you'll see a lot of Gen Z, and I think beauty as a category, fashion as a category has a huge appeal to young population, and today's consumption is being driven by them. They are, I think they spend differently. They spend differently, and they're there to enjoy travel, enjoy lifestyle, and maybe eating out. So you can really see the impact of their consumption on certain industries.
Yeah, we met Mr. Tata, Mr. Noel Tata here, who's among the guests, and he was saying even in the Zudios stores, beauty is becoming a big segment. Many might say that it's linked to 4 years of, it's ongoing bull market, which has created a lot of wealth for a lot of people. But Mr. Piramal, I want to ask you, we touched upon consumption, but for a 10 trillion economy, we will need many more houses and finance for families to acquire those homes. You're present in both these areas. What trends do you see that give you hope in these sectors?
So I think we will reach a 10 trillion economy in the near future. I think what's important, as the Prime Minister says, is to have a Viksit Bharat, which means growing the economy as well as growing on the Human Development Index. If we have to grow at 8% GDP to reach 10 trillion, the financial sector has to grow at least 18%. My concern is that there will not be enough of capital available to grow. Debt is very important. As we've seen, history shows that debt is what takes us forward. If we've talked about the pillars of growth, which the Honorable Finance Minister said, one of them, of course, is inclusive development. It's also infrastructure, and it's the financial sector. Today, we are too reliant on banks.
Yeah.
Almost 60% of the debt is given by banks. That's where I think with all the effort the government has done in the JAM, the Jan Dhan, Aadhaar Mobile, I think a lot of data is available. Yeah. And we need to reach finance to the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. And that's where I think NBFCs play a role. And
or the corporate bond market. I mean, you need to finance long-term assets with long-term finance.
Correct. And there is no developed corporate market, and neither is there. And what I see now is that the funding to NBFCs is being constrained because banks are, you can't have only banks lending. So I think it's very critical that the upper layer of NBFCs, which are now being regulated almost as much as any bank is, or near there, you need to allow deposit-taking licenses.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to really emphasize is on the human development goals. The Honorable Prime Minister spoke about aspirational districts in 2017, and there are 112 aspirational districts. If you look at if the 112 districts were to be taken as a separate country, then I'm sorry to say that in terms of really GDP, we would be somewhere 185th out of 192 countries. So I think there, unfortunately, not enough attention is being given. The Prime Minister has given a lot of focus to it, and we need to work on it.
Right.
16% of the population lives there, only 2.5% of the funding of CSR goes there. Yeah. And similarly on education, and similarly on health. We have a long way to go to make it really a Viksit Bharat, which is inclusive for all.
I'll come back to you on that point because you raised a very important issue. But SNS, new jobs, they are not getting created in agriculture but off farms or in services. Now, even if half of India is to get urbanized, back of the envelope calculation says another additional 25 crore people will have to move out of villages. Now, my question to you is, can they be fitted into existing cities like Delhi or Mumbai, where large-scale redevelopment is going on. We are seeing the Dharavi redevelopment project in our city. Can we accommodate them?
I think you called me last to ask the toughest question. So, but look at it the other way. I think you should look at it from not only fitting into the cities, but how to create employment. Come from a platform which is sitting on the highest backlog ever in its history. Out of the spate of inaugurations done by the Prime Minister, 20 of the projects have been done by us, including some of you had the pleasure of traveling through the largest undersea tunnel and the Atal Setu today. What I see is a terrifically positive atmosphere within the country. I wish I was 40 years younger. Mr. Naik hopefully had recruited me now, but we are on the other side of life. There's so much of positive energy within the system today. We employ about 375,000 laborers at any given point of time. And I'm telling you, and honestly telling you, I'm running short of 40,000 laborers. And we are not getting those laborers. This is basic skills like carpenters, barbenders, fitters, riggers, welders, masons, whatever. We're just unable to just mobilize them. We're just not available. This tells two stories. One, the MREGA schemes, the direct benefit transfers, and various other schemes introduced by the government are working at the ground level. And maybe there's no need for such people to come to some of these project sites to work. Number two, because of the excellent relationships at the Middle East and other countries that we have today, phenomenal relationships, I think one of the organizations that has benefited heavily is Larsen & Toubro. And you see phenomenal amount of work there. And much of the workforce, in spite of their localization, etc., 40 to 50% of the labor strength are Indians. And therefore they're getting jobs abroad, which means also remittance money back to India, etc. So this positive atmosphere, which is there both within the country and in some of the areas close to India, has created a need where people need not necessarily migrate to cities. This is one. The second aspect is this huge development of the hinterland, roads, rail, and creation of new settlement areas like Dholera, Shendra, Bitkin, and such. I think you'll have huge industry migration to some of these other areas instead of being the met cities. So when you have that, new jobs will be created in places which are relatively unknown today. And thereby you have a place where some of these cities are going to develop as new cities. And that's
So will they have that kind of scale? If I look at Delhi, Delhi's 1,483 square kilometers to be precise. Will Dholeras of the world be of that scale to fit in, our India's large population?
So
the new centers.
You fly over Delhi today. It's not Delhi. It's Noida and Faridabad and Gurgaon and Maneshwar and God knows what else. And maybe it's going up to Sonipat today. You look at Bombay today, there's no more Bombay. Bombay is there, but then you go to Navi Mumbai, you're going to have Alibag developing, you have the Navasheva area developing, you have the new Mumbai area developing, you have the Sitco Nagar developing. So it's greater Mumbai, it's very greater Delhi. So you have massive cities coming up like Hong Kong or Guangzhou or whatever it is, and this will house 35, 40 million people and not necessarily in Mumbai alone. And therefore we are creating a different paradigm. And the paradigm is also sort of supported by an ecosystem which is positive. Second, there's a lot of peacefulness. Of course, you read our television channels and newspapers, you get a lot of other news, but there's one city where I'm allowed to come back and sleep in my own bed. Anywhere else in the world, you're worried about it. From Yemen to Vietnam, you have turmoil. Here's a very peaceful, lovely, democratic, and great clean country. What more do we want?
Correct.
But we have to grab this opportunity and see how to push the scale forward to achieve whatever we need to achieve. That's the way I look at it.
But Mr. Jawar, you've traveled across Southeast Asia, and Ms. Piramal also, I would like your point of view on this. We are building new cities, we are aiming for a $10 trillion economy, but are we factoring in issues like air quality, pollution, healthcare, the quality of life, basically? Because that is, as Meeraji said, as important as we talk about mobility of labor, and moving beyond the urban pockets.
I speak from the lens we look at it, which is that a large part of the population, indeed there's urbanization, but there's a large part of the population lives in the villages, in smaller cities. Factories are spread all over the country. We have 29 factories. As a small way of making a difference, 18 of our factories have this program called Prabhat. It's a 10-year program where we take the community around the factory. And this started as early as, I remember, as a trainee, we used to call it integrated rural development program. But now that thing has been scaled up, we've got a decade of experience now. Almost 10 million people have been impacted on livelihood, on water conservation, on good agricultural practices. So we must first of all be mindful that real India lives in the rural and the small towns. And companies with big reach like ours that get to almost all parts of the country need to make a difference to the communities that we live with. And if one and many such companies did that, that's how you make a difference to the nature, to climate, to waste and opportunities such as those. I think the urban stress, probably the other panelists more competent to respond to that, that as super cities become big, you do need modern urban planning, because today at least 60 cities, more than 1 million each. China has 400 of those cities.
Yeah.
We don't have the luxury of making them ground up. So we'll have to think of other innovative means to make sure that they don't get into a logjam where the productive capacity of the city is basically lost because people are on the roads. And that is going to take some
I
engineering.
asked you also because you worked a lot in China, so you've seen how China has tackled this issue. I mean, before the Beijing Olympics, everybody talked about the black sky or the suit, across, and that became a big global headline. So that's one of the reasons why I also asked you this. That you work there. How have you seen?
I think the model in India is unique and distinctive. The arc of growth will be quite specific to our conditions. And even in urban cities, if you have to do inclusive, you have to be inclusive.
Yeah.
There have to be more creative ways of solving problems with the participation of people and the communities. In a sense, bottom up. And perhaps my colleagues can respond more competently on that front.
Ms. Piramal?
So I think I'm just picking up on what was said before. I think we are trying to really work in the remotest corners of the country across, because I think that's where it's important, whether it's conservation of water. Water is a big challenge across the country. And our people, we have almost 5,000 full-time people in our social projects, and they're working to see how we can make better use of water, how we can have better practices so that productivity goes up off the land that is being used. I think that is what is important, and educating people as well. As far as cities are concerned, as far as factories are concerned, I think today almost all the more, let's say, better companies are very conscious of the environment as much as anybody else is. We need to look at some of the older plants and see how we can, accelerate their development so that they are in line with what is the best practice.
Falguni, India to get to 10 trillion GDP mark will be much faster if we boost the women's participation in the workforce. Now, as a successful women professional, you were a banker before, turned successful entrepreneur, where do you see still the bottlenecks and the challenges for women?
I think greater participation of women in the economy is not if but a must. And however, we also have to admit that I think given the traditional gender roles as well as the demands, societal demands that are made on women, I think what happens is that most of us who are great believers in equal opportunity and would like to see a lot more women, I think the numbers that we see, the reality we see, it really is not looking good. And I think all I can say is that I think this has to change, and it is changing very rapidly with younger women. I think at NICA of course, we have 50% of our staff is women. And we do feel that women need to be empowered to be in the right decision-making roles. They need to be empowered to think of their future. And I think our message to women is that let the spotlight of your life be on them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very important, and it'll come as a change that women should want it. And I think there are certain requirements in terms of them wanting it, and then I think the society will come up with answers to what is it needed for truly equal participation of women.
Right. SNS, we're seeing a new credit cycle, but based around retail rather than corporate loans. I know L&T Finance, you're focusing now Also, you're restructuring the organization and focusing more on retail. Do you think a mega investment push is waiting for elections to be out of the way for private sector capex to really pick up?
Yeah, much talked about question as to why the private capex was not happening, but in a way it's happening. Maybe you've not seen the tiger of it, as they call it. But you can see it happening. During COVID times, let's say we represent somewhat the infrastructure of the country. Our order book was nearly 90% government.
Yeah.
Today, I would say it's about 65% government. So you've seen private orders kicking in. And therefore, this trend will continue. It will continue to increase. What you have to see is once the basic infrastructure is done, which is the roads, the rail, the basic necessities of human beings are taken care of. This is a beautiful example I'll tell you. If you've flown from Kolkata to Delhi, let's say 10 years back, you just take off from Calcutta, you see darkness except for Varanasi in between, Lucknow in between, and then you land in Delhi. Today you see the swath of light.
Yeah.
It's terrific, the Atal mission, what has done in terms of rural electrification and such. The Har Ghar Jal program, where you lift water from a lake or a river and transfers it through huge 5,000, 6,000 square kilometers of territory and deliver water right in front of a house, is an unbelievable thing for rural households, because the rural household lady or somebody had to trudge kilometers to carry a pot of water on her head and get it back, and today you just pump the pump and you get water right in front of your doorstep. The gas supply at many rural houses is another game-changing program, because the massive use of firewoods, etc., burning your head and hair to cook food for your family is now again it's a massive shift in the way you look at life. So you have so much time more for other things. Imagine it. We used to have an advertisement, I still have in our corporate magazine, where you put a lady and a young girl sitting with a bulb on top of her head. The meaning is that today, after 6 o'clock, you can spend your time reading, watching TV, etc. An earlier time, they used to just go to sleep or while away the time. You didn't have time for anything else. What it does is this unleashes an extra terrestrial force into the economy, which is educated people, which is Nari Shakti, huge amount of ladies coming to the workforce because they have the time now. And also COVID has taught us work from home and work from anywhere, and work from a bus stand, work from a rural house, and therefore you have people with heavy brains working from many parts of the country, which was earlier not the case because you had to come to a big city to work. I think these are unbelievable changes that are happening.
So you will not agree to the fact that, what many commentators say, that we are seeing private sector capex picking up only in PLI-linked schemes or those linked to enhanced public spending in infrastructure. It is actually more broad-based.
PLI scheme definitely has helped, no doubt, but I think it's more broad-based.
Okay.
It is more broad-based.
Okay. Mr. Piramal, you're also in retail lending, where there's been a lot of turmoil recently because of RBI and SEBI's regulatory actions. Do you think it's an overkill or a cleanup of the KYC regime, which eventually will be good for the system?
I think the way I see regulators are that they don't want to take any chances. So before there is any issue coming up, I think they raise enough heckles so that people are all conscious about it. I don't think there's a challenge today, but I think with so much growth in retail and unsecured lending, that's where the regulators are worried. And so it's fair that they raise the issues. And I think most people are now pretty conscious of it. And so you will see that there will be lending which will be more, I think, more sensible. And especially some of the new, I don't want to say that, the fintechs and all, who did not have as much experience or knowledge about what lending is. I think now you will see that that has been now curtailed.
Right. The other theme, is digitization. Everybody talked about it. Satyan talked about AI. Cyrus talked about ChatGPT earlier. Falguni, the success of our digital infrastructure, UPI, Aadhaar, RuPay, has been an outcome of intent, time, money, and investment. We are exporting them, and rightfully so. We all as Indians should be very proud of that. Where else can we replicate to create such large-scale public goods? Can it be in education? Can it be in healthcare, R&D?
I think all of them. I think even in retail, we hear from our partners that what India has today, from a digital, execution perspective, is far ahead of elsewhere. In fact, I wanted to comment on the investment front that the capital expenditure definition has to change. Companies like us invest a lot in technology, and unfortunately we have to write it off every year. So there's a lot of investment that goes into technology, it goes into education, and all of that is not really being capitalized. And that is being used globally to deliver, obviously, India could take all of these services from our shores and deliver to companies abroad. So I think the entire digital capability, be it in education, healthcare, retail, because I'm familiar with retail, and is ahead of what we see globally. And I think the brain power that we have in our country is really helping us solve very complex problem at scale. And I think we will see India having a more, like what we saw in IT services and BPO later, I think that could really very well happen where from our own shores we provide digital services to the world. In fact, it's already happening. And
Right.
I see that as a big
And
phenomenon.
I'll get Mr. Jawa on this. Beyond capital, which we seem to be attracting comfortably now, and labor, which we have a surplus rather than shortage, the third variable in the equation is productivity. And there, a lot of hope is pinned on digitization. Now, you've led several digital transformation across Unilever around the world. What's been your experience and how are you doing that in India?
I'd like to just zoom in on something that has been built, in fact, in India. We have an app called Shikhar. So we say 70% of our business is in general trade,
Right.
traditional trade, small kirana stores, and that's the bedrock of the Indian economy, 60-odd million small enterprises. We've been building this app called Shikhar, which is essentially an app on which the retailers can order. So we get to 3 million outlets directly, which 1.3 million now use the app regularly. They can order anytime they want. So today we have 1.5 million signals coming every day. We know what they want, what they're surfing. And this platform by itself is a big opportunity, for instance, for us to serve on their own business development needs, better bookkeeping, loans, education for their children, insurance for their shop. And it becomes not just purely a transaction of our goods, but also a form of a platform, a relationship. And the literacy levels and the intuitiveness of the UX these days is so easy that the technology is not just a very niche. It's a very much of a mass democratized tool, and I see that happening in this very, very fundamental and basic part of our business. And I'm very, very optimistic with what we can do with that particular asset that's been built over the last 10 years. So that's an example. And, stuff like AI, we're using that in this area. So, we can customize offers
Right.
for retailers and so on and so forth. So the possibilities are endless, and that itself is how productivity in our line of business, for instance, can be unleashed, as an example.
And so there's a lot of worry also that AI will destroy the job market. Now, Mr. Piramal talked about the human capital index. Now, are we as a country creating enough creators who have agency, who can leverage AI to their advantage, or are we just producing great executors, or, as some people would call them, automatons?
Then I'll answer the question in a different manner, if you permit.
Of course.
Leave the AI part of it out. So these technologies will come in, will zoom for some time, will boom out, and something else will come in. That's been the world. As I see it, there are 4 or 5 major shifts that are happening which will take care of many of these things. Number one is the digital shift. And that's very important because it's creating unknown thought process. People like me will get outdated. Younger guys with more dexter fingers to handle the piano will be more prosperous in the situation, but so be it. For example, within the company today, we use AI for looking at contract conditions and picking out nasty conditions, funny conditions, conditions which you're not used to, etc. We're looking at data to see how to improve operational efficiency. In our finance business, we use data to look out who can be given a loan, who cannot be given a loan, KYC and other things are much better checked. I think it's a terrific thing that's going to happen, and it will be there for the next 10 years. It will change things the way we have never seen. There will be a different paradigm as we see it. The second is the geopolitical shift. This is, the huge migrations you see Mexico to US and even within India from states which do not develop very well due to political and other reasons. There will be migration to states which are more prosperous. That will lead to issues of tension of ethnicity, caste, etc. And we need to see how to factor that into our way of working and such. Third is this alternative fuel, which not many are talking about. It's important because we used to this petrol and diesel. I think slowly the advent of EV, ethanol, methanol, maybe hydrogen tomorrow, or something else as we go by, will again change the way we do business. In many of our sites today, we started using solar-powered vehicles, which was never thought about.
Correct.
And more important is the sustainability aspect, which we discussed, but you know, sustainability is not ESG. The number of hospitals that have suddenly come up after COVID, the number of schools and educational institutes which have sprung up after COVID, not necessarily a typical school, but this e-shiksha learning and stuff like that, they're all remarkable. I think these shifts will take care of many of these aspects of other tendencies of negativity that will come in, because we need people with that kind of equilibrium and brain to be employed in such areas, and thereby a massive reskilling and retraining of people will have to take place beyond the necessary skills required to develop.
And that is happening.
Happening, not at the speed one likes. It could happen better. So all of us have to play a part in it. It's a very, very deep-rooted game. It's a very, very tough game. You're talking about 1.4 billion people. It's not easy to manage that, but these are happening, and this is something which is very, very interesting as we go forward.
Right. I think we are running out of time, so last word to you, Mr. Piramal. And this Satyan touched upon. Our youth are today brimming in confidence. But are we fully exploiting the demographic dividend the way we should? Indians are developing the best tech for the world, but are they doing it for Indian industry as well?
So they are doing it for Indian industry, but your question whether are we really maximizing the potential of the dividend, of the demographic dividend, I think there's a lot more that we can do. In terms of education, just to tell you that, we do an annual survey in an organization called Pratham, which is called ASAR.
Yeah.
In ASAR, we find that in class 3, the people on an average of only 59% of what is the global average in India. And when you go up to class 10, it is only 36% in school learning levels. So I think if we can, raise the level of education, which I must compliment the new education policy which this government brought into after several decades, is a step in that direction that requires a lot of training for the faculty as well as parents and students, but I think that's the way to go. So yes, there is some dividend we are getting, but not enough.
We've covered climate, we've covered credit, we've covered consumption, digitization, urbanization, all in half an hour. I think that's a remarkable feat. Rohit, SNS, Falguni, Mr. Piramal, thank you so much for this riveting conversation. Let's enjoy the rest of the evening.